Are you preparing for your upcoming CASPer? Here is a sample CASPer written station with expert responses. Here is the prompt for your CASPer written station. There is a local bully, Thomas, who has been taunting children as they walk home from school and has been known to create a fearful environment for other children in the neighborhood. One day, he is troubling a group of innocent girls, and Willie, a fellow classmate, was fed up and punched the bully repeatedly. The bully was badly harmed and taken to hospital to get stitches. His parents are now asking who did this to him. Let's go over the 3 questions that are associated with this CASPer station. Number 1, what should you do? Number 2, what are your thoughts on the philosophy that one must have a taste of your own medicine? Number 3, do you think that schools should implement an immediate suspension or expulsion rule for bullying, even on the first instant? Let's break it down question by question, and we'll start with the first one. So just a quick reminder that for CASPer written stations, you will have 3 questions associated with each prompt, and you will have 5 minutes to type your responses to each of those questions. For the first question in this prompt, what should you do? This is a scenario type question. The reason we know it is a scenario question is because it is putting you in this hypothetical situation of witnessing the bullies with Willie and Thomas and asking you how you would proceed. Because this is not a real life situation, it is a scenario or a hypothetical, that is how we are able to identify it as a scenario question. We have a recommended structure for this question type. It is important to learn and internalize this because when it comes time to take the real CASPer, you won't have a lot of time to think it through. So having these structures internalized will help you articulate your thoughts a little bit quicker. For scenario type questions, the first thing we always want to do is identify the most pressing issue or the most vulnerable persons. So who or what is your priority in this situation? What is your biggest concern? This can just be one simple sentence that shows the evaluators that you have your priorities straight. This could sound like, in this situation, I'm most concerned about X. Once we identify the most pressing issue, you want to gather information. In every CASPer prompt, you are never made aware of all circumstances, or you are never given the full picture. So prior to presenting your proposed solutions, you want to gather information through private conversations to get a better idea of what information you are working with prior to showcasing your proposed solutions. This shows that you are not jumping to conclusions and that you are mature and rational and getting the full picture prior to giving some proposed solutions. The third and final thing we want to do, and of course the most important part, is providing those potential solutions. And we do this using our if-then sentence structure. So based on who your most vulnerable person is and the information that you gathered, you will give proposed solutions in the if-then sentence structure. We recommend that you start with a best case scenario to show the evaluators that you are not being judgmental and assuming the worst. Then you want to move to a middle ground and a compromise, and then finally to a worst case scenario and how you would respond to that. Now that we have this all worked out and we know the structure for scenario type questions, let's see what an expert response looks like in response to the what should you do question. In this scenario, I'm most concerned about the physical well-being of Thomas and the mental well-being of Willie. Firstly, I do not want Willie to get in trouble for standing up for himself, but at the same time, his actions were wrong. I would encourage Willie to report what he did. If he refuses, I would tell him that it is my ethical responsibility to report him. However, to seek justice for all the bullied students and hopefully reduce the penalties Willie may face, I would get every student who has been bullied by Thomas to sign a petition or come forward so that Thomas may face some consequences for his negative behaviors and hopefully change his behavior. So let's talk about why this was such a strong response. So as you'll remember, since it was only a couple seconds ago, I just went through the structure for our scenario type questions. Identify our most pressing issue, gather information, and then provide those proposed solutions in our if-then sentence structure. So the expert in this written station highlighted the fact that their main priority or their main concern in this situation is the physical well-being of Thomas and the mental well-being of Willie. This shows the evaluators that they are able to prioritize the most pressing issue or the most vulnerable person in this scenario. As the expert moves through and gathers their information, they then provide 2 if-then statements or 2 scenarios that they will be responding and providing solutions for. The first one, best case scenario, is that the expert reaches out to Willie and asks him to come forward and tell the parents that he was the one who beat up Thomas. That is best case scenario, of course, and as we know, the world doesn't always work out that well. So the expert moved on to another one where Willie might be reluctant to come forward. If this was the case, the expert said that they would let Willie know that it is their ethical responsibility to come forward because his actions were incorrect. So we now have two strong potential solutions in response to this scenario question. I also want to note that the expert took it a step further and encouraged the other students who had been bullied by Thomas to sign a petition in order to ensure that Willie does not receive significant discipline because of the actions that occurred. We are obviously identifying that the actions that Willie took were inappropriate and physical violence is never the answer. However, it was in response to Thomas bullying his classmates. So the expert is doing a really great job at showcasing their maturity and their problem-solving nature and highlighting that the priorities are still being prioritized in this situation, despite the fact that he is still coming forward and reporting Willie if he decides not to come forward himself. Let's talk about the second question in this CASPer written station, and that is, what are your thoughts on the philosophy, one needs to have a taste of your own medicine? So if you've been following along, or if you're new here, you might notice that this may not fall into the typical categories of scenario, personal, or policy type questions. It's not a hypothetical situation that they're asking you to respond to. They're not asking you to recount any personal experiences, and they're not asking your opinion on a policy or an issue. Whenever we have a question type like this, we categorize it as a quirky question, and that is because it is exactly what it is. It is quirky and it doesn't really fall into our standard categories. To answer a quirky question, you want to start with what the prompt or the quote means to you, what emotions or memories it invokes, if any. Then you want to try and connect the situation to yourself or what qualities, traits, and skills you think you can extract from the situation, or in this case, the quote. Note that you'll have to tailor your strategy depending on the question and your field, but just making sure that when you are doing so, you are still keeping in mind that you want to showcase one or many of the traits that the CASPer evaluators are evaluating you on. If you need a reminder of those, they're right here, and these are important to keep in mind through all of your question types and your responses. Now that we have that strategy in mind, let's see the written response to this quirky question for this CASPer station. There are many situations in life in which a wrongdoer learns from experiencing the pain they inflict on others. However, there are many angles to consider. On one side, if an individual suffers what they make others endure, they are more likely to realize the extent of their wrongdoing and are less likely to be a repeat offender. However, two wrongs do not make a right, and there are some situations in which it is not even possible to do so. For example, some wrongdoers, like dictators, are highly protected, and in many cases there is no way to give them a taste of their own medicine. Overall, I think it is wrong to give people a taste of their own medicine. I believe legal avenues should be taken to hold people accountable instead. Although there is no standard structure for those quirky questions, as I said, this is a very strong response. The reason being is that the expert goes into what the quote means and the implications of both sides of the coin in this case, whether someone should get a taste of their own medicine or they shouldn't. Not only did they respond to the prompt, but they also provided a real-life example to back up the justification for their response. Finally, and most importantly, they addressed the prompt as a whole and gave their opinion on whether or not they think that people should be getting a taste of their own medicine, into which this case they disagreed. They even took it a step further and gave an alternative. In this case, it would be legal implications. And this really shows their maturity and really highlights qualities that their future professions are looking for in their applicants. Let's move on to the third and final question in this CASPer written station. The question was, as a reminder, should schools implement an immediate suspension or expulsion rule for bullying, even on the first instance? So this is what we identify as a policy type question. The reason we know it is a policy question is because it is asking you your opinion on a certain policy or issue. In this case, it is schools' responses to bullying. Once again, we have a recommended structure for these policy type questions. It's really great to learn these because once again, you won't have much time to articulate your thoughts. And if your structures are already internalized, this will help you get your thoughts out much quicker. For a policy type question, the first thing you want to do is showcase your awareness of the topic. This could just be one simple sentence that tells the evaluator, hey, I know what I'm talking about here. Next, you want to showcase a balanced approach by providing pros and cons on both sides of the argument. You always want to do this prior to giving your stance to show the evaluator that you are being non-biased and considering all parties that may be impacted by such policy if implemented or not implemented. Finally, you want to take your stance and address the prompt as a whole. Do you think this policy should be implemented? Do you think it should not be implemented? Why or why not? Once you take your stance, you want to take it a step further. So if you agree with the policy, you want to highlight some modifications that will address the cons that you discussed in your response. If you disagree with the policy, you want to provide an alternative to it to address the pros that you identified. So now that we know the structure for a policy question, let's hear the expert's written response for this station. Schools implementing an immediate suspension or expulsion rule for bullying, even on the first instance, is a complex issue that requires balancing student safety with fairness. On one hand, this policy could send a strong message that bullying is unacceptable, creating a safer environment and deterring potential bullies. It also provides swift protection for victims. On the other hand, such a strict approach may unfairly punish students who may benefit more from guidance or counseling. It could also disproportionately affect students from marginalized backgrounds who may already face challenges in school. I believe that while bullying must be addressed immediately, automatic suspension or expulsion on the first instance may be too extreme. Instead, I suggest a more nuanced policy where first-time offenders receive mandatory counseling or intervention programs with expulsion reserved for repeated or severe cases. So the reason this was such a strong response is once again, it fits into our recommended structure. The first thing the expert did in their response was showcase their awareness. They made the evaluator aware that they knew the implications and the sensitive nature that goes along with a policy like this. Next, they moved into their pros and cons to show that they are taking a balanced approach. They discussed 2 pros on the one side and 2 cons on the other side of this policy. Once they discussed that, that is when they took their stance. In this case, the expert disagreed with the policy because they felt it was too extreme. However, given the pros that they identified, specifically being able to kibosh bullying immediately and deterring bullies from bullying, they identified an alternative as first offenses get counseling and then expulsion and suspension being reserved for more severe cases. So once again, this response followed our structure, and the evaluator will now know that this expert is fully aware of how to approach a situation in a non-biased manner. If you want to learn how to tackle every CASPer question type that's going to come your way for both written and video stations, take a look at what BeMo's CASPer Prep program has to offer at the link below. You can also find the link in the description of our video. We can't wait to work with you and get you that 4th quartile score you've been looking for. Stay tuned for more videos just like this one that will help you ace your CASPer, interviews, and much more. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you are in the know when these videos are posted right away.